All right, hello, welcome back, everybody. PayPal and Patreon are down below if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. So, a quick little update coverage one this time while we wait for monthly data to show up. The US over the last few weeks has gradually been sending more and more naval and other military assets down to the southern Caribbean, around and offshore of Venezuela, under the public guise of it supposedly being to counter cartels smuggling drugs. But if anything is actually going to come of this military presence, it has nothing to do with drugs, as is hopefully obvious to literally anyone. It would be about petroleum and most likely regime change, just nothing usually in the manner of the way people think of it. The way the way US interventionist war over oil works isn't some weird snatch and grab idea like the public seems to think it is, as if the oil is a bunch of money in like a briefcase that's in an office somewhere that like some spec ops team breaks into and grabs. Typically, as was the case with Iraq and Saddam, the nation in question has a much higher oil output or production capability than it usually is maintaining. For example, Iraq being capable of 5 plus, even maybe as high as 9 million barrels per day, while it was only ever maintaining 1 or 2, sometimes going up into the twos towards 3 briefly. But Saddam would always start some crazy stuff like invading Iran, then invading Kuwait, and then doing the internal genocide stuff against the Kurds and all the other internal terror purging stuff he was doing in the 90s post Gulf War. In each of those three cases, said erratic, crazy, off the table decisions resulted in chaos and Iraq's oil production falling off the map for a decent period of time. And after three strikes in a row, it became pretty obvious that it wasn't going to stop. So, US strategic decision making in some manner decided that it was time to remove him and replace him with a amicable government. The same thing has become the case with Venezuela, as Venezuela has the largest known oil reserves in the world and is capable, given the sheer size and scale of the Ornico Belt, probably capable of something like 5, maybe even 6 million barrels per day for a century plus. However, they've never really gone near that and have constantly approached and then fallen back down from 3. They've never usually, up until the 21st century, fallen as sharply as Iraq constantly did. However, as we've gone over these last 2 decades, things have gotten a bit worse. They had their whole crisis in the early 2000s that saw them briefly drop off the map. And after that, they remained pretty decently wobbly for a time until the nation itself collapsed internally in the late 2010s. And when countries collapse, they kind of take their oil production down with them. So their oil production collapsed to only a few 100,000 barrels per day. And among the 7 million people who fled the country since Venezuela collapsed, that included somewhere between 40 and 60% of their oil and gas engineers and workers. So they have been short staffed and short materialed and just overall incapable of restoring even their mild midway 3 million barrel per day oil production. And they have begrudgingly accepted assistance from Chevron off and on, but even with that, the amount Chevron's been allowed to do and work with has only been able to very gradually pull them back up to a meager 1 million barrels per day. And Maduro has constantly threatened to just cut everything and kick Chevron out again and not accept assistance. So we might be nearing a strategic decision making point where that is no longer acceptable, as because of other supply disruptions that are going to be coming, such as Iran and Russia, as well as the upcoming decline in US production as we are passing through the peak of what shale was able to bring it up to. It is it would be considered in best strategic interest to get that very viable source of an extra 5 or 6 million barrels per day online and on the market. Not to mention the fact that Venezuela is right there. So this would be a near home or backyard proximity energy source. And there is also the Guyana factor. Guyana is a rapidly rising oil producer who will probably end up somewhere close to 3 million barrels per day at peak before then declining as their path is going to be a lot more normal looking. However, they have constantly been threatened by Venezuela, and Venezuela has off and on over the past few years done troop buildups at the Guyanese border and then pulled back at the last minute. So Maduro's not being all that rational or predictable, not really sure whether he's going to invade Guyana or not. So everything mentioned before, plus also compounded with the fact that Guyana's upcoming oil production, which is almost at 1 million barrels per day already, might be threatened by Venezuela potentially, is likely compounding the decision that might have been made or be in the process of being made right now to just deal with Venezuela, particularly before all the direct involvement with the Chinese invasion of Taiwan starts up next year or in 2027. Or, of course, it could just be a theatrical show and the ships could just return back to their East Coast ports and nothing happens. I don't know. But we'll see. If it does happen, though, hopefully, obviously, it's not about drug cartels, it's about petroleum. But anyways, that's it for this one. Thank you everybody for sticking around and listening. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already. PayPal and Patreon are down below if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. There's a link in the description to a Drive folder with hundreds of graphs free to access across all kinds of different subjects from oil, energy, mining, everything. There's links to my photography, to my Blue Sky account, and one in the top pinned comment to my cat's YouTube channel. May God bless and protect all of you, and I will see you all around next time.